Hello and welcome to Featured Flights. I'm your host, Darren Varell. This show is about art and how it inspires, evolves, and changes the lives of an audience as it moves through time. I'm not just interested in the work, but also the people who make it. Today, I'm speaking with Mikey Weinberg. Mikey is a longtime friend and, along with his wife, Jerry, the co-owner of a record shop in Chicago called Loud Pizza Records. He's also been a promoter, record label owner, graphic designer, merch company, band manager, barber, I mean, you name it. So much, much more. Mike, it's nice to have you on the show, and thank you for taking your time to speak with me today.
Yeah, Darren, you've been a longtime friend of ours. Yeah, we love you, I don't know.
I appreciate that. I love you
glad
too.
to have me. Glad for having me,
Of course. Yeah, this is, I feel like there's so much to unpack here. This is why this is going to be a good episode of this podcast, because you and I have been friends for a long time and we share so much, but yet we never really talk like this. You know what I mean? Like when I see you lately, it's at a show, it's loud. We get to say hey for a second, or we're doing some promotion at Loud Pizza, and we rarely get to sit down and sort of unpack the years and what they've meant to us.
Oh yeah. Like we have a long history. I don't even know how I met you, but
we're going to go through that. That's for sure. I know. Well, that's the fun thing about this is I think we're going to be like understanding some things about each other that we didn't really know. Again, like how we met. That's one of my questions, and how I remember it might be different than how you remember it.
I'm sure it does, but I loved your band. That was like my passion and drive was your band. It was just. I don't know. It's like anything else. Chicago's a very small town. You know what I mean? It's like you have the north side, south side, and it's just one of those things that I think, I don't know. I'm excited to talk about this.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so to kind of help it go, I usually write questions for my guests, and it usually it depends. Some of the questions are the same, but most of them are also tailored to the people and how I know them. So okay. I'm going to go through those questions if it's okay with you. There's about 10 of them, and usually it kind of sparks the conversation. So if you don't feel like answering that question specifically or whatever, but it does spark some sort of thing that you remember or whatever, then you can feel free to go off in whatever road you feel is comfortable for you. Okay. But these, I think, are just helpful to get the conversation going. So the first one that I have for you, is, music can be a hobby, an outlet, a business. And for some people, it's a way of life. You've been involved in music ever since we met, but not necessarily as a performer. Can you talk about your love of music and what prompted you to be so active in it?
Well, I think honestly, when I was in high school, music kept me out of trouble. I had a lot of friends we were all skateboard kids, and I started a band with the other high school friends, and we weren't very good. But what drove me was a lot of my friends were getting messed up and partying a little too hard. Why I was booking shows around Illinois, Iowa, the Midwest every weekend, playing these shows. And if I wanted to book my band, if I wanted to book my own band, I would book other bands coming through the Midwest. We would book at VFW halls and Knights of Columbus's and, any churches' basements, like anything we could get. And we always try to find out who has a PA, and you puzzle together a crappy PA or whatever, or use guitar amps as PAs or whatever it may be. It's just one of those things where that's how my music started. And I realized that it was easy. I don't know. Somehow I fell into my first compilation CD. Was kind of fall into it. I think it was the idea because I was trying to learn how to screen print, and I was like 16 years old, and I was like, I want to put out a compilation of some bands, and then I didn't know anything about like 300 DPI at that time. I was paying money to go to the local college and use their computers, and then I eventually that's how it was. Like we didn't have computers back in the day. The college in their high school had like 3. And I just learned how to eventually I made this CD that was so pixelated because I was using word paint on it.
Yeah.
And that's how it all started. And then the second CD I made was a band that got dropped by a major label that had some funding because they got advance money from it and they got their masters back, and we figured it out too. So I had tattoo artists do stuff, and then we were scanning stuff in, but again, we didn't know about DPI. that's kind of how it eventually led to like putting out records. And then like, like I had the promoters thing. So I started booking tours for the bands I was putting out records for. And this is going back to like the 90s. Like this is like the 90s, so it's like, it's just a passionate drive. Like we would rent VFW halls for $300 and have a $2, $3 show, but then have to pay somebody for a PA. So it was like, our goal was to break even, and it never
Yeah.
did, but it was just something you did, if you want to get 50 people out to a show, you did. That's what we did.
Well, totally. And that's good because my first introduction to you was through my band. So as you're talking about these ways of coming up and kind of figuring it out, right? DIY is so much of that underground punk scene. Do it yourself for all those out there that don't know what DIY means. And it's sort of like what you're saying, Mikey, getting the posters printed yourself, figuring out how to make the art yourself, because this is a thing that doesn't necessarily make people a lot of money, especially when you're an underground punk band. You're starting in your parents' basement or garages, and you're getting together a bunch of like-minded people. You don't know much about business, right? You're not really thinking that all you know is you don't have any money. So it's like, how do I get people to know about it? I know it's different these days. There's a lot of social media, but I think that's cool about the people that are sort of like in our age range is that like we do have the understanding of the social media these days, but we also understand what it took to kind of hit the streets and get the word out in a different way. And I think that works a lot to our advantage. But yeah, my first introduction to you was through my band, The Scissors, and you went on to manage us for a short time, and you would book us, and we would perform in and around Chicago with your company Rose Red. And so that was my first introduction to you that I recall. And I think you were the only promoter I knew in Chicago outside of Brian Peterson and MP Shows. For anybody who's listening to this, Brian Peterson booked the Fireside Bowl, which at this point has become sort of iconic with the success of Alkaline Trio and different bands. I mean, that was really the only promoter that I knew. And then you were, very good at getting hold of us and letting us know, hey, I like your band. I think you fit well with these bands. Could you tell me a little bit about the music scene and why you wanted to book bands and promote that scene? And what was it about the Scissors that interested you?
Like I just have a passion for it. Like it's a drive. It's like, again, like it's a hobby that was like you have a drive for, but it's a full-time job. Back then we were booking 25 to 40 shows a month. You know what I mean? Like there's so story going back to like I was talking about the high school days to leading up to this. But you know what I mean, like it's just one of those things where like you have a drive and passion. You know what I mean? There's people who just want to play in a band. There's people who are just meant to show up. There's people who just have a drive for it. And that was my drive for it. Like, I love doing this. I love trying to connect the dots. It's like logistics. You're trying to get a package across the country and you're trying to put everybody in one place. But one thing I always looked at when I used to book shows was I was like, let's have a party. And you try to have 20 shows to 40 shows a month having a party. And a lot of other promoters and venues that were out there didn't understand that. But how I looked at it is like, if I get these two bands together and these two bands that know each other and you put them together, people hang out all day long and have a party with people they don't know and people they do know. And that's what people didn't understand about the stuff. Like when Sub T was like, purchasing Beat Kitchen at the time, they didn't understand that. I mean, like, it was just a weird thing going on. It was just, but that's what worked. And that's what, Darius and, John Babin from Criminal IQ, they were doing punk rock Fridays at the Lions Den with Scott, I think his name was, that ran that first.
Right.
Show.
I guess I should. Amazing. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I should say Darius too, along with Brian Peterson, because he was booking as well. So sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, those like I was working a lot with Darius, and Darius was like, we were kind of like doing this thing, and eventually it just got too busy and just kind of, we just got too busy. You know what I mean? And it's the thing is like, I was always a young guy in the scene, but all my friends were like 10 to 15 years older. And like, I remember like I was getting half sleeved in high school, and like the guy that was tattooing me was taking me to 20 Up shows and nobody questioned at the time. It was kind of that great thing. And it was just different times back then. You know what I mean? It was just what leads into everything that's, you have to have a passion at driving this. If you do it for the money, there's no money in music. You have to have it. It comes and goes. It leaves and goes. You can be comfortable and you can lose it tomorrow. You see that happen like multiple times. And there was an era probably around 2010 where all these bands like Chicago started getting recognized. And what kept a lot of people out of Chicago was the weather here. You know what I mean? The winters kept a lot of people out. But there was always this little thing where like a lot of great Chicago punk bands never left Chicago. You know what I mean? It was like I always go back to Another State of Mind where Mike Ness says like, "Why would I tour? I just make money in California." But we never made money in Chicago. We just hang down and party. You know what I mean? And that
Yeah.
was kind of the thing. Like we had our north side, south side scenes, and we had our suburb scenes. Like I was just looking at the Glenview hardcore comp. You know what I mean? Like yesterday, I was like, "Oh, Firstborn Pete Wentz is on this, and Luke Skywalker, which is Luke Skywalker started a ska band, which became a grindcore band." You know what I mean? It was just like I'm like looking at this, like thinking about like there was a ska punk scene in the north suburbs, Elmhurst, Villa Park had their own scene too. You know what I mean? You guys had your own compilations out there as well that are kind of, you know what I mean? The South Side, I didn't know anything about the South Side. I know Blue Island had its own thing. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
with bands
Same
like
with
Mest
Northwest
and stuff.
India.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mess. You know what I mean? And then there was a big like Oi scene out there. It's just interesting. I mean, it's just you just try. What I try to do is just have parties, and it always worked. And like I said, you would lose money on some shows, and the next show make money, and you just keep recycling it through. And I was not in any way like living like a lavish lifestyle. You know what I mean? It was just one of those things like you did it for the passion. I did. I came. It came so much after a while that I started like hating music in a little bit, since
Yeah,
away.
yeah. It becomes a
But I
job
had
a
a
bit, right? Yeah.
yeah, when it becomes a job, it's not fun.
Right.
And I had a staff to do it. And I actually got another job, and I still was booking shows, but they were running the shows. And it's just because I just wanted my guys to have a job. And it's like people probably didn't know that at the time. It was tough, because at
Yeah.
the end, like going back to the flyers and promoting back in the day, like we have a 20-year-old employee, 21, 22, who I had to help him make flyers for his upcoming show because he made it in Canvas or one of those like apps on his phone. He was like, the venue told him to drop off some flyers for his show, and he didn't know how to make flyers. He just
Yeah.
know how to make them digitally. And I go like, oh, at least do 100 DPI, send them over, they'll print them out. But one thing I always told people is like, it's like Spotify. There's a million bands on Spotify, and you can get lost. So how you make yourself different than everybody else? And I was
Right.
like, one of the bands that, promoters are like, if you went out and promoted your shows and worked harder than everybody else, you push yourself higher. Like you guys did that, Shot Baker did that. And like I said, you guys, certain bands may not draw 100 people on their own name itself, especially for a high ticket price at the time, opening for a headliner. But what you're doing is you're making the promoter's job easier. So like you're putting a band on there who's working twice as hard as everybody else or 3 times harder. You're making that promoter's job easier to getting the word out. You know what I mean? Like when we booked the Addicts at Logan Square Auditorium, that was like a huge show. And the whole thing was like, okay, like Scary Larry, the Great Tones helped us out, and we're gonna do this, and like, like we kind of helped those people that were kind of doing it, and then we kept circling our friends around, and as well as putting those extra bands into it, and then it's a lot of work. I remember that whole show, the Addicts. It was like the first time here in like X amount of years. Like Chicago PD's like, I don't know, box truck showed up because there was a huge fight between the North and South Side people there. It was just like,
Yikes.
and then like you're over there like, man, I got 900 people, 1,000 people in this little small auditorium with no PA, and which they have a PA, but it was like those things like this house that's not house type thing.
Yeah, I think
But anyway,
my girlfriend. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, I was just like I ramble on for a lot about this
No,
stuff,
yeah,
so.
totally. And I think it's good because it's going to move into my next question. And one of the things that you're talking about, sort of what I don't think a lot of people realize about somebody like you who's promoting shows back in the day is like you're the reason why people come together. You're the reason why the bands come and want to be there and mingle with each other. You're the reason the venues are interested and find out about like different bands that they can book that draw. And then you're also the reason that the people show up. And my girlfriend and I talk about it so much now. She's somebody who had been around in the scene and had seen all of this, and she would come and enjoy the show, and she loved that. We talk about it a lot, and I'd love to talk to her more about it. And a lot of times when I talk to people from the scene, they talk about the community, that there was a place to go for people who were like, that's like the punk rock thing. Like we're all kind of crazy, weird artists and outcasts. And like we all had a place to come
Yeah.
together and be understood. And like, again, as you're talking about this, one thing that I'm glad we can kind of say is that you're one of the reasons why all of us outcasts and weirdos were able to come together on all angles of music. And that's a really beautiful thing.
Yeah. And I don't know what to say that, but I appreciate it. Like I said, we're all different. We're
Yeah.
all like, this is the society we're in today. We're all different, but we have our own walks of life. We have our own stories. It's the same thing like during COVID, like you were talking about how I was a barber. Like I had a passion for that for a long time, eventually became a barber and whatever. But during the COVID shutdown, I saw the difference between my friends' businesses, restaurants, bars, from 1099s to self-employed, independent contractors, self-employed, to W-2s, to owners, to employees. It's all about kind of coming together and understanding where we all came from. And that's what I love about the Fireside Bowl. Like Pearson and Shane Merrill did a great job with the Fireside. Like you go there and see a grindcore band, see a ska band, see a rockabilly band, you see a 77 punk band, the same bill, and
Yeah.
people hanged out and just had a good time, and it was okay. It was okay. We just didn't show up for our friend's band and left. It was okay to be different, and
I
that's
know.
how I always look at it. And so like going back to the 2010 era when like Chicago music scene was kind of blowing up and things were trying to be like that. Like I had a lot of bands that were coming through who had like a little chip on their shoulder that they're going to be the next Fall Out Boy. They're going to be the next Playing Like Tees or whatever. Or, like any of those bands that, were on Action Height Records or any of those stuff we're doing. But it was like, you have to go in here for the love of music and know that it just may not work out. You may like it, just go in there and just do you and become you. And some of those bands, it takes 10 years for people actually, to find out about them. And it's just like, be honest to yourself, and like, it's okay to recreate yourself and be creative and to push yourself, but just don't try to fit a mold that's not you. Just be you, and that's why I talk about the outcasts and the difference. And like, when I was I could tell stories when I like had a big old mohawk and I was like 16 years old, skateboarding down the street, or 15 or whatever. And people used to yell shit at us. We have pickup trucks. I remember a pickup truck pulling out in like Bloomington, Illinois, or Leroy, Illinois was a town, and people trying to get out and fight me. And then like they would yell like really offensive stuff, which I won't say like on the show because I don't know, whatever. But then I started combing my hair back, and I was like, oh, I want to look like my grandfather did back in the day, And then they're like yelling, hey Elvis, what I mean? And like there's like again, it just never leaves that people just want to pick on people, and we were the outcasts. We're the different people of society, and that's what creativity and music and art and all that stuff makes us interesting, I guess, in a way.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I definitely remember being booked with a bunch of hardcore bands and like metal bands, and I was like, "Why are we being booked? Like, why are we sharing the stage?" But sometimes it's like you just got to pay your dues and come up, And then all the metal guys just became our friends. Then it was like cool to do that, but at first
Yeah.
you're like, "This doesn't make sense," Into so I think the way that we're going down this road is also explaining a little bit about how you learn about business, and that is something that I wanted to pull out because you over the years I've watched open so many, and you talked about the barber stuff, which I'm going to get into, and you talked about a few other things, but I've really admired that about you. You always are going down in different things and trying to figure out different things, but it's always sort of connected through this through line of music, which I think early on you probably learned a lot. And I think one thing that also combines all of this is something that people probably don't know. I think that most folks don't know that you're a very gifted graphic artist. Jason Link and I, which is on,
Oh
he's
boy.
here in our conversation. We talk about it a lot. He said back in the day that you would always be very, very good at art and graphic design. And I was like, really, Mikey? I was like, I didn't know that. He's like, oh yeah. He's like, was in the top people that was creating art back then. And I know you know how to lay out albums, you know how to screen print shirts and fully brand a business from print to digital and beyond. And I've been an admirer of your work for a long time. That's not something people know very much about. So could you talk about that and the importance of the skill in your endeavors, and has it helped along the way?
Well, I think what it comes back to is I couldn't afford somebody else to do it. And so you have to learn yourself. You know what I mean? Like my wife, she's graphic designer. She went to school for it. She's very good at what she does. She's worked for a lot of big accounts with like a lot of stuff that's helped rebrand themselves. And it's interesting because I come from the 90s where everything's the grunge era. You know what I mean? She could like put a bunch of effects on it. You saw that like the hardcore metal bands and the punk bands and cut and paste, but like I don't know, like I never knew like Jason knew I did graphic design stuff, and I never knew that, just something we never talked about. I always looked up to you guys as stuff, you know what I mean? Like I just
Yeah.
had to do it because I couldn't afford it. I remember back in the 90s asking people to do one of my first CD albums, or like 7 inches album, and they're like, well, I want like $2,000 in the '90s. That's like 4,000 now. I'm like, well, I'm making like these records cost like a lot of money to make. It's just like, especially now, 7 inches there's no money in 7 inches back then because all the parts to make the 7 inches, let alone like pay somebody like 2-3 grand to do back then. It was like, so I had to learn it myself. Like I would go to college. Eventually I got a crappy computer. I took 2 of those big old zip drives and try to bootleg their Photoshop on it. And I'll go home in a super Juno or AOL 999, like lie up and try to download some photos and start altering and changing it, like print them out, alter it, just like start changing stuff. And just like, I had to learn the getaway, that's what I call it. It's like, we had no money, what I mean? Like we're poor kids.
Well, you ended up getting really good at it, I would say. I mean, I'm looking at a lot of what you're doing right now, too, just for the Loud Pizza stuff, and you're continually making merch and different things like that. I imagine, again, what we're talking about here to the audience listening is that you learn a lot about business and ways to make money in a arena where you don't make money. So a lot of times people say that, there's no money in music and there's no this. Well, that is true for the most part. In art, it's hard to make money, but there are ways, and you can figure it out as you go along if you love it. Like, I don't want to stop making art because that's what I think that I'm supposed to do. I don't want to stop making music because that's what I believe I was put here to do. But I need to find a way to eat. And I need to find a way to keep it going. And that's what you have to learn through this, is all this business stuff. And that's why I think the graphic design that you've been able to put together over the years has really fueled so many of your creative endeavors, and it makes it appealing. Like, I've seen over time all of these things that you're doing, and they all look great. It's like, oh damn, Mikey's got this great thing going on, and it makes you want to come to it. So it's an important element that I think it gets overlooked, at least for you, because again, we never talk about it, but I know you do all that yourself.
Yeah, like it's pretty much me and my wife that does a lot of stuff. We have some friends that help out, but like in the end, it's just like, I never knew. I just like, bands come with the ideas and you're trying to figure out how to, the bands have a hard time expressing things sometimes. I'm sure like being a band is the same way. And for us, we just want to have fun, creativity, and we have just like sit around like, what about this? What about this? And this is kind of how we come up with things. And it's just one of those things that I don't know. Like, we just have crazy ideas, and you never know with businesses. It's like you said, you try to be comfortable. You try to be comfortable enough to get by. And like, I mean, it is what it is. And it's like, it can all disappear the next day, but it's all about recreating a wheel. And like back when I used to work in advertising as well, as a corporate advertising, and doing CDs and album artworks, it always like, I became OCD on alignment. Like where like the UPC and the copyright and publishing information has to be really aligned and all that. I came like OCD on this, and like why the creativity stuff is like one of those things where it just kind of, I don't know, you just get crazy ideas, and this is what you want to do, and this is what you don't want to do.
Yeah, the crazy ideas, it's funny because they are like so out there, and you have so many of them. And then as soon as you start to like really whittle it down into like the perfect package, it gets like really like, it's kind of amazing because you have this huge idea bank, right? And then you kind of really hone it in, and like even to the final packaging of what people are going to see, what they're going to hold in their hands. It's like, then it becomes the OCD thing. Now it's like this thing that was so crazy and out there has become really focused.
So this is something I learned from advertising. So like, again, it goes back to the Spotify conflict, like I was talking, or Spotify thing I was talking earlier, is like, what makes yourself different? And I mean, with like, you can set a product, you can set a product on a shelf, but where does the human behavior go of the character of somebody walking in? So if you walk into a store, how does somebody find something? You know what I mean? What you want to be like different than everybody else. And so like, you can go over here and like literally set something over here. Does people see it here? Or their eyes go over here, or their eyes go over there? It's about watching people's behavior. It's the same thing where a lot of people in grocery stores will pay for certain shelving items, just to watch their behavior. You know what I mean? It's just, to me, it's just like, that's how I see it. Is people read a certain way, people see things a certain way. And that's kind of thing. So like when I go back to my flyers and my alignment thing, I would be OCD about that. Instead of like throwing a bunch of like too much information there, make the consumer like chase the information, make the consumer, like the customer, like find out more and engage in that stuff. And I think that's the biggest thing today is like, there's so much engagement going on, but it's about the follow through and about the how to get them keep going. And at what point does their attention stop because everything is thrown at you so quick and so fast? It's like you have to keep them engaged. But the problem is how do you link them first? You have to find them. You know what I mean? Like if this is like neon green and you know what I mean, this, you know what I mean, you can see I don't know if you can see the colors, but on the replay, you can see it's one stands out a little bit more than the other one. You know what I mean?
For everybody listening, he's holding up Post-it notes of a pink and a green Post-it note. Yeah, and yellow here.
Yeah, yes. You know what I mean? So like people are going to see it different. Now that's right in your face, but go back 10 feet, go back 20 feet. It's about how do you somebody walks in and how does somebody see something? And that's, to me, that's like important. It's visual communication. What's the cheapest way to market something and talk to somebody? Visual communication. I've always learned that like men tend to be very loyal to brands. Women like to touch stuff, feel stuff. I learned that from my wife. And after she's told me that, I've actually noticed that. You know what I mean? I'm very loyal to a lot of brands. I'll keep using a brand, even if they change the ingredients on it and it's like damaging my body or whatever, or they damage it. It's like, well, I'm loyal to it. And at some point you hit that wall, we're like, okay, I gotta change it. You know what I mean? And I think it's the same thing with record labels. Back in the day, people used to, when they found new music, they go buy music based on the record label or a sampler or a compilation. That's how we found new music. You know what I mean? And it was like that loyalty of what it is, like Fat Records. People were like, oh, I knew what Fat Records, what sound like. I knew what Epitaph sound like. You know what I mean? Like I knew what was I was getting. Now it's a little bit different. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where like, how do you engage? How do you fall through? Things are changing so quick. You know what I mean? It's one of those things. It's the same thing with like a band starts a side project. Is a side project ever going to be as big as the original band that was like huge? You never know. Some people might engage for 5 seconds and then maybe completely different because the creativity wants to be different or whatever. You know, it's just, I don't know. It's just one of those things you have to constantly have visual communication with people that first engage with them. It's the same thing if you sell in a record store or a bookstore. You know what I mean? What makes that random person just pick something up like, oh, this is interesting. Let me try this, you know?
Yeah, so, no, 100%. I think that, you know, this is an overall thing about like standing out from the crowd and being different is all really at the crux of what you're talking about. And that it has to do with also being the crazy lead singer, right? Like everybody loves the crazy lead singer, whether or not like that person is doing things that are, you know, good or bad. It's like you can't look away from it. And it's like that makes the music more interesting.
Yeah. The weird thing about I think like by us opening a retail store has been one of the learning's most interesting experiences. And I don't know how what's too far as talking about. I'm very like blunt and very open about stuff.
I'm going to ask you about Loud Pizza if you want to save it because I'm going to go there.
Well, okay. I was just going to
go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead. It's okay. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Please.
So I'll keep it short. Was when a 12-year-old girl came in with her father and we opened a store. And like by that point we were carrying a lot of punk and emo stuff. And that's what we were into. That's what we did. And this 12-year-old girl is like, do you have any sad lesbian music? And we're like, well, name some artists. And I was like, I got angry lesbian music, like Bikini Kill, L7, all this stuff. And I had to learn. And I see that happen over and over where like their father, I know their dads or their mothers, and they're like my age or older, and they just don't understand the new generation of new music. And it's like I said, like, keep in mind, that was you 20 years ago too. And it's like, it was a learning thing for me too, because it turned us on to so much more new music, things are constantly changing what happens. And it creates that creativity in us. Like this 12-year-old girl inspired us because
awesome.
She, you know what I mean? It's just one of those things that, again, come back to the creativity and art and stuff like that. It was like, communication, you mean visual, vocal, whatever, it helps a lot.
Yeah, because you can't just sell the stuff that you like. You have to sell the stuff that the people out there like, you know, it's not just about you. And that's something that I think sometimes gets lost in music creation as well, or art creation. It's like you don't always have to think of the audience, you know. And I've heard Rick Rubin talk at times about like, don't worry about the audience. But it's like at the same time, you should also worry a little bit about like what you're creating and if it's going to connect with people. And I think that's kind of what you're saying. It's like you can't just be in the record business and sell things that only you care about. I don't think that business is going to last very long. And that's just my thought.
Yeah.
But
Like,
Okay, I'm
yeah,
going to switch gears if you don't mind, because I want to I
okay,
want to get
that's fine.
back to that, but I want to
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of just talk a little bit about the barber stuff because you had mentioned it. It said in the years. My question is: in the years since we worked together in music, you became a barber, opening up your own shop, even. And it seems like barbershops and rock and roll go hand in hand. I'd imagine it fosters connections, influences new looks, and celebrates the classic styles that are synonymous with rock and roll icons like Elvis Presley, which you talked about earlier in your own look. So, what led you to wanting to be a barber, and do you still cut hair?
Well, so like growing up as like I don't know, we would call ourselves middle class, but we were not middle class. Looking back on it, we were a family. My grandma used to cut my hair, used to cut my family's hair. She was no way interested. She just had a kit, a barber kit from Walmart or something, or Shopco or whatever it was, like one of those stores that were weird Jacks back in the day. She just cut my hair, and like when I remember, we all had the bowl cut in the
Yeah,
'90s, the bowl
yeah,
cut,
yeah.
and she cut my hair in a mohawk. And we used to bond over her
Wait, your
cut my hair in a
grandma cut your
mohawk.
hair into a mohawk?
Yes. And my
Wow.
stepmother was like, your dad's going to kick your ass when she sees this.
I love it.
And so I don't know. She always cut that. Like my grandfather was balding, what I mean? Like, so she cut my dad's hair, my brother's hair, my cousin's hair. It was just one of those things that I constantly did. And where I grew up, it was a small town, I call Central Illinois, a small town, like 30,000 people. There's a tattoo shop in town, Hawks Tattoo, and one of the guys over there was Ed Young, and like there was a lot of people that worked there I used to hang out with, and I used to go to school. I used to skip last class of school and go hang at the tattoo shop or hang at the record store. I had a roommate when I was 16 or so who ran Co-op Records. I was living with him. That's a whole long story. But next to the tattoo shop was a barber shop, and they connected in the back with a guy from Iowa who used to do piercings. It's come over like once or twice a week and do piercings. This is back when tattoos, you had to be 21 in the state of Illinois to get tattooed. So I used to hang out at the tattoo shop, and he would make me cassette tapes of all this garage punk stuff and like 60s like rock and roll that influenced a lot of stuff. And so that was like, so I used to hang out with him, go see his band, the Resonators, and he was in a bunch of other bands in like Bloomington, Illinois and stuff growing up. And, he lived in this small town. And so I used to like, you hang out at the tattoo shop for 2 or 3 hours, and this guy's still working. And I'm looking on it now. This guy's like, man, I probably bother him a lot. So I would bounce over to the barber shop and hang out there for an hour and bounce back to the tattoo shop. And like, I don't know, there was a point in my life where I was just like, I think, I was really close to my grandmother, and she was digging a lot of stuff going on. And I just like, I always looked at my grandfather's photos and like, man, looking back on them, they look like a bunch of badasses. Like my grandfather, my grandmother, and like their parents had like a house down the street was like a shaped like an L, almost like a house where like people, it was across the street from Carl Sandburg's birthplace. And you would be born in this house, and like your kids would live in a separate house next to it that was attached to it. And they had this photo of them sitting on the steps where it looked like a minor threat photo. Like they're sitting on the steps, and he's like, dude, my grandfather always looked like a badass in his photos. And like, look at me, like when I get down the road, I'm gonna have this bowl cut, And it was just like, I just started changing, I mean? Like when I was 18, I was very excited. My grandma reminded me, go sign up for the selective service, what I mean? Like, go do this. And like, I never joined the military. That's something I always like, wish I did. I know it's really weird, but like, that's something I always wish I did. I think I had to grow up quick. I mean? I worked a lot. I worked at Wendy's all through high school till like 2 or 3 in the morning, went to high school, finished high school, moved away, went on tour. Last week, in high school, we were on tour, but that's what made me change into a barber. And that, circling back around, that barber ended up giving my first set of kit, like barber kit, very old suitcase, because I told him I was thinking about going to barber school, so I felt really lost. And this is around like 2002, 2004 or so. And I was like, I'm thinking about going to barber school. And he gave me his own first kit. And at that time, there was only Peoria Barber School and Belleville, which is down by St. Louis, and which I ended up moving to Belleville for like a short minute, then realizing how far away it's from St. Louis and I have to get a job in St. Louis. So I was only in St. Louis for like maybe like a year or less. And I couldn't tell you what year that was, again, like the same time frame, like maybe 2001 or something. and coming back and going Peoria. And then I was living in Chicago. So I was driving down and going Peoria, sometimes staying in Galesburg. And I was living at my buddies. Like I was playing in a band from Peoria guys. I was living on their couch sometimes going to barber school. And I was still booking shows. We're playing tours every weekend tours. And then I was doing the records on top of it. We're putting on our own records over bands. So it was just like a lot. But I went to barber school. I was one of two only white people in this school. The other person was from a halfway house, and it was in East Peoria. It was kind of a hood area, and so like if you go to barber school, I don't know if it's too much. If you go to barber school for a haircut back then, you either you've been kicked out of every other shop in the area, or you're on like fixed income. And so like any old white man that come in was like the only person that would let me cut their hair because they didn't trust me to cut their hair because I was at first at barber school. So I finished school there, did it for a while, worked with the old man. And then when I went back into Chicago, I was just like, I don't know what to do. And that's when I started booking shows with Darius. Darius started booking shows and just started working and just making any ends meet again. So like the whole time, my time frame of like things is just constantly moving around Illinois, just constantly moving. Never really having a place either to live kind of type thing. But it was just like one of those things. I used to keep my records at like these two girls' houses in Peoria, and I would never see them for like 6 months at a time. And then I come back and there's a bunch of them broken, like H2O was snapped in half and all this other stuff. And it's just like, it's just what it is. You're young and looking back on it, you never know those records probably go for a lot of value back then. Now.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, it's like you're going to leave them here for 6 months. I want to make some money on them.
Yeah. But when I moved to Chicago, like barbering still was not, a lot of people were going to salons still. And it was just one of those things where I was doing advertising. I was booking shows, led in some other jobs, and I was doing advertising, and the recession was coming, and you saw the recession coming. And usually in advertising, you have a year of contracts before those contracts expire. And they started laying off a lot of people. And we were doing huge corporate accounts for there. And is this one of those things where, well, I have this trade, and somebody I knew, Luke from Pete from Luke Skywalker ended up opening a barbershop, and he needed help, and he didn't know social media stuff at that time and a lot of other stuff. And I was getting a haircut from him, and I was like, dude, I need help. Do you want to do this? And I was like, no. I kept telling him no for a while. And I was like, well, maybe that's what I'll do. You know what I mean? And that kind of landed me back into it. At that time, Mad Men, Boardwalk Empire was going on. So a lot of people wanted classic traditional haircuts, which is like what's kind of led me to what this going on. I love this face, and it was what's kind of led me back into barbering. I had this passionate drive, and like anything else that you hire somebody, you want to be part of their story. And even when I had a barbershop and had employees, they're going to be good for like 2 or 3 years, 5 years, and they're going to go open their own shop. And that's how it is. You want them to be successful. And that's what kind of happened from there on,
Yeah, totally. So, and, again, I think there's like a connection of that. It's just like going to a show. You get somebody in a seat, you get to talk to them and hear their story for a while. And I actually took somebody who was a regular customer of yours to lunch the other day. I don't know if you knew, but Demko, he hit me up and he's like, hey, all right, we have a mutual friend, Mikey, and he used to cut my hair, and I'm here in LA now. And I was like, well, let's go. I'll take you out to lunch. And we had a nice lunch. And then the next day he went to a comedy show that my girlfriend did, because he said he's interested in comedy as well as music. And so that was cool. Like then, all of these bridges in between Chicago and California, it's like, we know mutual people, good conversations, and it just leads to good connection, I'm glad to hear a little bit about the business, because I know that that's like something too that is a way to also make money. It's like keeps you kind of connected to rock and roll. We talked about like being in advertising and things like that. That's a way to do art and make money, right? You can actually make a living at it, and then you've had that business and then you kind of went into another direction. And I just wanted to know at this point, like, what are some of the biggest challenges you've faced in, music and creation and these businesses that you put together? Maybe if you could think of like the top 3, and it could be something that's happening to you now, or it could be something that's happened in the past, but like, how have you overcome those challenges?
The challenges is right now the biggest problem is, well, I could probably say two quick ones is everybody wants everything now. Um, People tend to not, when some, like, let's say a record comes out now or something comes out soon, like people want it now, even if it's not even available now.
Like,
And
oh, I
that's been
could
the
get it on
hardest part is,
Amazon and it would come to my door, right? Yeah.
yeah, there's a whole generation out there. It's like the Amazon generation, which is like we found like the hardest people sometimes to work with because they don't understand it. You know what I mean? Or they'll like there's a communication boundary between a certain generation where instead of saying, "Hey, I want to cancel my order," they'll just do a chargeback. They don't understand the damage it does to a small business as a chargeback, you know. And that when we get a fee, then we have to get go through this whole process of stuff, and it takes a while, and it damages it. Just communicate with us. It's the same thing. Like just call us, or whatever, email us, or like we're very communicative. The rising cost of doing business. There's a lot of local government like laws and state laws that are constantly changing and stuff. The price of stuff going up. Like it's interesting from putting out records and to CDs and all that stuff back in the day. Like it was kind of interesting because the distros used to be such a small margin, and the retail and the labels were like the more majority thing. I would say because let's say for example was like Victory Records used to be in Best Buy have those end cap deals where it was like $10, $9.99 or whatever. And CDs were returnable, but vinyl's not. All sales are final vinyl. And so like you may have a record in there that's like just, whatever may be wrong with it or whatever, or it doesn't move, you're stuck on it. You know what I mean? You're stuck on it. And it's the same thing with like, like in kind of like big event like that you have like to buy large inventory for, you can knock a small business out of business overnight because of it. And the rising cost, what has happened since like the Victory Records I was saying is now you have some distribution companies that are coming in there buying up all the other distributions, creating third-party websites, even discogs pages, and then selling it cheaper to consumer, cheaper than the retail store is buying it for. And so like you have people who don't understand the difference that we have to go through in order to get that product. And it's like, we're trying to make you happy. Like it's not available or they're shipping to us or logistics now. Cause like there was a time during COVID where our last pressing took over a year to make. And that's why we started Loud Pizzas because we were trying to have fun and find creativity and our boxing stuff in pizza boxes and slices and making it fun. It was just like, we still had this like creativity still built up. We wanted to do something else, but the pressing was taking so long. The other thing is always is, it's just like, I think in the end, just do the best you can. Like, you're not going to make everybody happy. Like, people come to our store all the time and it's like asking for used. We don't care about used. If we do carry used, we try to find more collectible stuff. And then once it's gone, it's gone. You know what I mean? Like, what's the chances of finding that again? Like, it's going to be hard. You know what I mean? Or is people trying to sell used stuff. They think they buy it for this price or they think it's worth this much, but it's like, they see it on eBay for $150, but it's been sitting on eBay for the last year. That means it's not worth $150. It's sitting there for $150 because nobody's want to buy it for $150. And it's just like, or they want to sell their used inventory. They think it's worth this much, but in reality, it's like retail needs to turn and burn and make money. It's dead inventory. It's just sitting there. Like I have staff, I have utilities. People also don't understand the cost of commercial utilities is twice as much than residential on top of it. So we're like, if you have your heat or gas bill at home,
Yeah,
is this
just to
much,
keep the lights on. Yeah.
It's more for commercial, what I mean? And they also don't understand that like we don't carry jazz or blues. We're not trying to carry jazz or blues. And like we stay in our lane. I mean, we're very creative, like to learn stuff and like explore things, but like there's just some roads that just other people just do better than us. And and that's how I look at like same thing at barbershops and the same thing with record stores, same thing with record labels. Whatever. We're all colleagues. We're not competition. We all provide something different from each other. Our competition for record stores is Amazon, Target, and all these other companies. And it's the same with barbershops. Our competition was Hair Cuttery or Floyd's or something like that. I mean? It was just like these big chains who kind of don't understand what a sense of community is. A scene, music scene, you know what I mean, is that we support each other. And then, me in Chicago, we had the Alley. The Alley was the local Hot Topic before Hot Topic. And a lot of people went to the Alley to support.
Got your leather jackets.
Yeah, I got the letter jacket Chicago flag, which everybody was like, "Oh, I got my police flag," and everybody was like, "That's just Chicago flag." You know what I mean? It's just
Yeah,
like,
yeah, totally.
you know, because the cops were wearing the Chicago flag on their jackets. But it was like one of those things where, you know, it was just there was a sense of scene back then, rather than just like a separation of just now and take. And I think things are getting better back to being a scene, but like we always have to be supportive and understand each other. And I think sometimes communication is important. Like when a customer like will email you about their order, dude, it's on pre-order for another month, and they're like, okay, thanks for following up. It's like you could easily just went to the website with the release date, you know what I mean? But you want to talk to somebody. You want to talk to
Yeah,
somebody
yeah,
your own way,
and that's
you
a
know?
great thing about having a store, right? People can come in and actually see somebody and actually talk to them instead of like, emailing over something that might get totally lost in translation when it shouldn't. And I was going to say too, the other thing about like the scene and everything, like, it's all the same. It's kind of like I think as you get older, you don't really realize how much someone's success is like a mushroom effect, or it spreads, right? So we're all friends with the Plain White Tees, and we grew up with them, and
Yeah.
Tom has been my best friend. Well, I've said it on another other podcast. When you're younger, I think you get like, why is this happening to them and not my band? And why is this, they're on the radio and my band isn't, or whatever. And you start to have this like feeling of like, why not me? But later on in life, you realize, oh, if they're successful, that means that I, as an artist, I might be able to do their album art, or I might be able to go on tour with them and capture some of the content for them. It creates jobs, and that's America, right? I mean, we're talking about
Yeah.
everyone's success is everyone else's success. And so to have, the record labels do well, that means that they're going to have more records for you to sell at your record store and a million other things,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's kind of what we're talking about.
Yeah, 100%. And it's the same thing. I'm like, so like a day to remember. I used to book a day to remember in Chicago. I remember 18 people showed up and for this show, and 10 of them were Victory Records people. You know what I mean? And it's kind of interesting. But they put out a new album this past, I'll say month. It officially came out last week, I think. But they let all the indie stores get copies of it 3 weeks in advance. So people had to come buy it before they actually streamed it. And it created like such a hype for it, a phase. And like, keep in mind, it's interesting to see him go from this DIY space I used to book, or like I think it was a Lockport like bar that I booked him in or whatever. I can't remember back then, to arenas they're playing, to like what these huge festivals, and just seem like they're coming back around supporting indie stores. And they put it on Fuel by Ramen, which
I feel like Green Day did that too on the new record, didn't they?
I feel like the Green Day album is really good. And the funny thing is, I felt like they give a little extra care to those indie stores. Keep in mind, they've been doing Pinhead Gunpowder for a long time. They were doing like, but do you know who manages Green Day?
No.
You should know this, because I don't know if you know him or not. It was Dustin Atlas. He does Weezer, Fall Out Boy. He was a Peoria kid, a Broomfield kid. They used to play in System 66 and The Forecast. And I don't know if you remember those guys, but he was local guys.
Yeah, I do know. And I didn't really know that. I knew they changed management companies, I think, on this new record. So I didn't know exactly who it was, but that's awesome. They've done really great. I saw that you guys did have an exclusive at Loud Pizza for that, right?
Well, we had like a exclusive variant they did the indie stores, and we had the slip jackets, which are nice. You know what I mean? That we didn't have exclusive color variant for that. You know what I mean? We had some for other bands, but not that one. But
gotcha.
You know what I mean? Kind of circling back around is, I feel like sometimes with these indie stores, we're forgotten about. You know what I mean? It's just one of those things where like everybody wants to copy an indie store that's like a chain, like Hot Topic or any of those stuff. You know what I mean? But the problem is it's just like a community. It's a sense of like, you have information in your community that nobody else has. And I think sometimes indie stores don't understand that. Like, it's just a matter of like being like, I don't know, this like sharing the information and just communicating with the customers. I think when you're so big and you're trying to figure out why, like, there's that disconnect there, is because they're looking outside, not looking in. But like Green Day has Pinhead Gunpowder, putting on indie labels and stuff like that. And they have that connection still. They understand it. And A Day to Remember came from
it, right? From the Lookout Records days and everything.
Yeah, and I think like going back to like when these bands like want to start, and like I said, talking about the Plain White T's or any of these bands that has success, but like it is, keep in mind like Fall Out Boy, they all started from hardcore bands. You know what I mean? Like it's just like all those bands were Spitalfield was another one. I love Spitalfield. They all started from hardcore bands. They were on Censor label. You know what I mean? And my old drummer was the old Fall Out Boy guy. Like I don't know if you ever knew that, Mike Periscavage. He was on the first two Fall Out Boy albums. I think it was like a split and something else like Evening Out with Your Girlfriend that was on like a Milwaukee label, and like nobody knows those albums and nobody cares. You know what I mean? They all think it's Take This to Your Grave. But going back to Atlantic Records and Fuel by Ramen was started by Vinny from Less Than Jake and Johnny, I think, right, from Lily Records. That was a Chicago suburb. You know what I mean? And it's just one of those things that was kind of like everything circle around. It's the same with Victory Records. Like Victory Records, like Action Heights, Action Heights was Abby Valentine was booking a lot of those Nights of Columbus shows for those pop punk emo shows. Why Shane Merrill from The Killer was booking all the hardcore and metal shows.
Yeah.
It's just
No, I
it's
know.
a community. It's a community.
Out here in LA, you see people like that all the time, and you're like, "Oh, what are you doing?" "Oh, I work at this record label." Like, "Oh shit, I remember when we were playing in a basement together." It's like it's
Yeah,
really great. It's fun to run into those people. I think this next question we've got the answer to, but I'm just going to say it anyway because I think you've kind of
yeah,
come through with it. But it's I remember you were making post barbershop, you were making t-shirts, and I think you had like kind of like something coming where it was like, okay, we're doing this merch company, but it kind of led way to, from what I remember seeing, it's not that we've talked about this, but it kind of led way to Loud Pizza. And I think I'm lucky enough to have stepped foot into the Loud Pizza location that was in Highland Park. We had a listening party for the Plain White Tees there, and that was really great to see. You did everything you've been saying. You made it this destination for people to really enjoy, and it's for real music lovers. And even the packaging, like I said, it went in a pizza box. I bought a hoodie from you guys that I still wear. And yeah, you put it in this pizza box with some stickers and stuff. It felt like you were getting something from a record label, like Lookout Records used to do that back in the day. And I think this,
yeah.
this thing that you're doing now, Loud Pizza with your wife, Jerry, has become kind of the culmination of everything that you've done thus far. And it's kind of put the perfect package together in what I'm seeing. And your knowledge of music and your knowledge of business has culminated into making this a perfect shop for destination for music lovers. And my question was going to be like, why do you think it's the perfect destination for music lovers? But I think you've answered that and everything that you've been saying, because you just have so much history that goes into it. You have knowledge of business, you have knowledge of love of music and what people want. And, that's why I think it's so great. And now, in my opinion, opening your second location at the Salt Shed. So everyone who's listening who doesn't know, Loud Pizza is at the Salt Shed, which is like a mini version of Loud Pizza. And that location is like directly where music lovers go. I mean, people are going there to see a concert, and here's some records that you can bruise through, kind of like Record Breakers, right? Which was in Reggie's, I think. It kind of seems like the same sort of deal. It's like, oh, you're already here for music and you probably love records. So here we are. Do you want to talk about that location a little bit?
Yeah, so like we moved in like July, August. This was supposed to be our first location actually. Like we're in the whole thing, but it just timing didn't work out. They're pouring concrete, and we did a lot of pop-ups for the last 2 years there and doing stuff. And in July, August, we've officially signed a lease there, moved in or whatever, call it. And then in December came, we started expanding more and more. So it's like it's becoming a full shop now. Like it's totally, but with this space, we took our time with it because our first business ever, a barbershop like 10 years ago, first brick and mortar, that first year, we literally like relayed everything out like 3 or 4 times before like, okay, this is the human behavior of how people walk in, where they walk directly to, what they see. And I'm glad we took that time because literally last week, Zespi, who owns Logan Arcade, who used to own Logan Hardware, used to run Southern Distribution back in the day, opened a second location for Logan Hardware, literally right next to us. So we got that human behavior. So like everybody did their build out really quick and did it. It allowed us to see what's going to happen, what's going to change. And now you can directly walk into the arcade from our store. You know what I mean?
Cool. Cool. I
So
love that. Yeah. I gotta go. I gotta come and
you
see that
know,
location. It's like so cool that you're in the salt shed. And of course, as I'm texting you, you're like, yeah, I'm sure you're busy as hell. You've got all these things going on, all these concerts that are happening. Probably in-store signings are a little easier because you've got like an artist that's going to be there, right? We talked about Phineas and all that kind of stuff. That's
yeah.
really cool. What a good thing for you guys. I'm glad you're in that space. It feels a little bit more, welcoming to a record shop than maybe any location you could kind of open up that's a satellite, right?
Yeah, it's good. I mean, like we're always thankful. We have again, like there's a lot of history there with the. It's kind of weird because like when we first moved in there, everybody working there was like half our age, and then like you start seeing Zesby pop up, and you start seeing everybody else. You start seeing Bruce who owns Salt Shed and owns Empty Bottle and Tully Hall. And you start seeing all these people that you familiar faces, and now it feels like a family again. Like it's finally
Cool.
it's circling back around. You know what I mean? And it's just one of those things that it's really comfortable because now I have felt like I'm just getting older and older, and like again, like I'm hanging out with people like half my age, and these like selling records to people that's half my age or less. And it's just like, why am I, it's like you feel really disconnected, but you have this passion and love for music. And it's just like, I don't know. This takes me back to like when I was a kid, when I was like 16 years old skateboarding. I'm like, who's the 25-year-old kid skateboarding? Is he a cop? And it's just like,
Are
I
you a
don't want to be
narc?
that guy,
Yeah,
yeah, you know
totally.
what I mean?
Well, what are your
But
plans
like,
for Loud Pizza in the future? Do you have like any more want to? Maybe this is a discussion for a Loud Pizza centric podcast, but do you have any wants to grow more? Or are you happy where you're at?
I think like this is, we're always looking forward. Right now we're really looking forward at like people. And I think what's happened since COVID and Amazon world is a lot of traditional retail is changing or is dying. I think people want convenience. Like we also are offering certain services that other stores didn't in an area, and it has helped out a lot from our first location. And we've been very accommodating for a lot of things. So like I think we're kind of like watching and trying new things. Like, I mean, just like I think people are looking for there's people who always want to shop. Those like diggers are also going to go into a different store to dig. For us, I think a lot of people want convenience, and we're trying to find a way to be convenience, fun, and very welcoming and entertaining. And that's what we're kind of looking at is to see how the transition into it. But we're also hitting a bump where a lot of people are. I think a lot of people are. I think people are kind of waiting on releases. Like there's a lot of deluxe editions coming out of stuff like literally like right after a regular release comes out. And I think it's hurting us because people are waiting on that. There's too many deluxes
They
coming
know
out.
it's going to come out. Like it's kind of the trend.
Yeah.
They know there's going to be another edition or
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah.
It's like even
There's a
like the
bunch of
last
like
Taylor
different.
Swift.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, there's last Taylor Swift album, like the day her album with the Torture Poet was supposed to come out, she puts the anthology streaming online. So people knew there was going to be an anthology come in. So they waited on the Torture Poet. You know what I mean? And then the Torture Poet had 4 different album covers. The bonus tracks were all different. Before, you had to collect every color variant with different cover artwork that creates a clock. You know what I mean? This is stuff I've learned from
Yeah,
the record
yeah,
store.
yeah. Well,
But
there's a
but
lot.
it's
Yeah. And
like,
I know there's like a lot of artists are doing those alternate editions. And so now I think what you're saying is like the public is caught on to that, which is a bummer for
they're
you
waiting.
because, it's hurting the sales. But at the same time, like it's still cool that they're making a lot of different versions because that might end up on your rack eventually. But it feels like so gross to me to walk into like an Urban Outfitters or something and see a bunch of like vinyl there. Like Urban Outfitters is like this vinyl shop. I'm the guy who used to like shop at Vintage Vinyl,
Yep.
Valhalla's, like a lot of those places where they could also pre-order. It seems like that's the kind of vibe that you guys have. It's like it's a actual record store. And nowadays records have become like, it's crazy that they've come back in such a big way, and you can kind of get those anywhere and at big retailers. And that's what I love about your guys' shop is like it feels like the Vintage Vinyl. If anybody doesn't know what Vintage Vinyl is, go and watch what was that movie, High Fidelity, right? It's featured in there.
Oh
But I
yeah.
used to like literally go there, and we used to get like Ramones vinyl that you couldn't get anywhere else. It was out of print or whatever. It was like that. You knew that if you wanted to get some legit vinyl, you need to go to Vintage Vinyl, and if they don't have it, they're going to look at ways that they can pre-order it or order it for you.
Oh, 100%. Like I remember in the 90s, like you go to every record store, and keep in mind, record stores back then were far in between. There was mostly CD stores, but like record store, everybody had like Ramones, like Road to Ruin, or any of those like ones. And there was a long period of dryness, like even recently, where you couldn't find those pressings for new pressings. And then it's like they slowly do, like Rhino does like little small reissues here and there, or make them like whatever, they remaster, make more artwork, or do something fun with it. I think like even like like Charlie XCX, like the Brat, there's like 4 or 5 different deluxe editions for that. And again, I think that I mean you're going to have those collectors and those diehard people holding out on those, but like I think people are just like waiting. They want to see what's next in his spin, especially if people are having financial harder times when with everything going on with their finances right now. It's like they're waiting, and they're gonna pick which, like the Taylor Swift, which album version they want. It's the same with like record store day. There's a cap on how much you can raise your prices for this. There's a suggested market price and how much you go over. In the end, the flipper makes the most of the money, and it's one of those hard, it's like the flipper is the one making the deal on that,
Man, I just got this amazing, sorry to cut you off, but I just got this amazing email from Mike Park at Asian Man Records. And his, like, basically in the email, he was like talking about a new edition. I think it was a new edition of Maybe I'll Catch Fire from Alkaline Trio. And he's like, peace and love to everybody except for you goddamn flippers.
Yeah.
Like, fuck the flipper,
He's the most nicest guy ever. And like,
he's
we
great.
Still like buy directly from him. And I just don't know how, again, like I've always had a fascination. I don't know if I ever told you, I actually applied for Victory Records because there's no one else to get a job in music before.
For Victory or for Asian Man?
Victory.
Oh,
and they wouldn't hire me. And Clint from Weird Nights Crime interviewed me and whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I'm taking the corporate job like 2 blocks over. But my fascination with like indie labels is how you earn a living doing this, how you like keep your bands happy, and how you like, I'm just fascinated that Mike can still do this, because after a lot of years during that 2015 era, a lot of those labels were selling, Trustkill that kind of sold off. You had all these other labels selling to bigger major labels for the distribution or for the catalogs. And Mike Park is still packaging records out of his parents' garage.
Yeah, the
and
garage.
He's like, still does it. And he's like,
because it's like you said, he loves it. Like, why sell? He's about like as punk rock as you can get as far as that stuff. Like, definitely 100%. Has not sold out ever through time.
Have you checked out his TikTok thing?
No, but I'm sure it's great. I want to now. Jesus, I didn't know he had one.
He's a TikTok, and I don't get on TikTok a lot. Jerry gets on TikTok. So like, I'm the Instagram person and Facebook. Oh, did you see this? And he's like, I saw it 4 days ago on TikTok.
Yeah,
and so
totally.
Like, it's interesting. But Mike has a TikTok page that's it's our everyday life, where it's like people like, it's interesting. Like people like, well, he'll read emails like, like, what the heck are you, like this, like some of the stuff you go through as a label, you don't know, like you're packing records or like this. And one person was complaining, goes, my record wasn't shrink wrapped. He's like, well, I hand packed them. I get my jackets made here, my records made there. I'm like putting these together. That's why it's not shrink wrapped. And I see more and more like metal labels doing that now too. And it's kind of interesting because I feel like it's almost like the damage and split seams is the reason, which is rising the cross. You have returns. So if I order a record from a distro and it comes with a split seam, I have X amount of time to return it, like within days or hours, and to return it if I can get it. And like if you keep, that's just raising the cost. They're 500 made, and you have 30, 60 return. That cuts down actually the cost of having you made of that. And I think that's also like one of the reasons why there's a rising cost in some of this stuff, as well, is the returns and the overage or stockage or stuff,
Yeah, I love that too, because I'm thinking about my friend who owns a restaurant chain in Chicago. We grew up playing music. Yeah, I don't know if you ever remember Michael Lane, but my friend Joe Fontana, who was in Michael Lane, and it was in the Scissors for a while too, actually, for just like
he was in Michael Lane.
Yeah, he was in Michael Lane, and so now he owns. He owns and started Fry the Coop. And so I've been lucky enough to do all of their branding and all of their art. And we've stayed so close over time. But he's and I love their business model. Sounds a lot like what you're saying with the TikTok stuff for Mike Park, is that he's very transparent. Like, this is what the costs are because, and this is why, and this is the quality, and kind of explaining that through his messaging. And I love that. I love that business owners can be transparent. It's like, yeah, we might be a little bit more expensive, but let me show you why, and let me show you why Cane's over here can get away with this. Oh, did you know that Cane's, like, they may say that they have 4 tenders and we only have 3, but have you checked the weight? And then they'll show you. It's really great because people just know what they know, and they don't dig deeper. And with social media, you can find ways to dig a little deeper and let people know why they're getting what they're getting from you, and why it's quality over quantity or whatever it might be. And I think you guys are doing a good job of that too, letting people know, letting the public understand that you do a lot of stuff on social media that I've seen where you'll explain, hey, here we are and we've got these variants, but there's only 3 of them. That's all we're going to get, because the plant won't let us get any more, and we can't bring the prices up. And that's great. That's great stuff. It's great for the public to know that and to really understand. I also think people definitely this day and age want to know all of the ins and outs of things. So why not be truthful?
Yeah.
If you've got nothing to hide, then don't hide it,
Yeah, it's 100%. Actually, I've been talking to Joe through our Instagram messages, and actually been saying, dude, I'm really impressed with this stuff. I remember him at shows, but I couldn't remember if he played in a band or put out a few records himself or compilations. But I actually, I just pulled my message like, oh, I've actually been talking to Joe.
So, awesome. Yeah.
I mean?
Well, you can tell him you did the podcast. That's he's a busy guy, just like you are. So I'm going to try to get him on this podcast as well, because it's, there's a lot to unpack there. Just people from the scene who have done well, that's great. I love to see it.
I'm actually really impressed, and like how he's expanded. Like you said, I saw his chicken things, what the difference is. You know what I mean? It's the truth though. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's also, people don't understand, like, vinyl has never been cheap to make. It's just one of those things that, cassettes are coming back. We were putting out tons of cassettes too back in the day when nobody else was doing it. And now it's funny because we were licensing some of these deals for cassettes, and then like whatever, working it out. And then some of those labels like cut us off, or like the license because they started doing cassettes themselves, but they were doing such a wide range. It ruined that funness out, because there was a vinyl collection. Like, there's vinyl people out there who start buying cassettes too, and they're better quality than they used to be. They do real time. Back in the day, you had to buy chrome to sound it because they were just doing it so fast and no care and love. But people, the vinyl thing, don't realize how much goes into making vinyl either. Like CDs, the glass plated CDs. I used to go down to Indiana. There was the East Coast side of Indiana. There was a pressing plant. And then eventually they stopped making CDs. I used to pick up the orders, and then they started making like PlayStation games, and I think they're completely out of business again. But it circles back around too. Like the vinyl pressing plants is just like, like Jack White says, is that some of these major labels need to start opening their own plants again. And I don't know if they ever will. It's just how it is.
Some people may be looking at it as it's also like a fad again, or something that it's going to go away.
Yes.
And why invest in it again? We want to be careful, right?
It's the same thing with like these deluxe editions, like, the Noah Khan that comes out that recently, and it's like $60 or $50. And then like the retail margin gets smaller and smaller. And it's like, dude, at what point is it worth even carrying or taking the risk on? Like, I knew one store who bought, that they're going to buy 15, and he's still sitting on 15. I was like, he never sold one copy, it's just, like I was even talking to a few guys last night, the Refuse place last night at the Salt Shed, and we were talking to the guys at the podcast, and I asked him a question like 2 weeks ago. I was like, you're very into like the emo pop punk scene. Where do you buy music at? And it was kind of interesting. And he told me, and then like 2 weeks later, last night, he showed up. He's like, I've been thinking about your question. And I was just curious. You're so heavily involved in this music scene. Do you buy music, or do you do not buy music, and where do you buy it from? Like, what if you do, and it's interesting. I think it got him thinking. But a lot more people feel like they're supporting like bands by buying directly, or buying on their Bandcamp, or buying a label directly. But sometimes these also too is you're buying from a major label that maybe, indie major label may own the indie label. Like people, like I see that with Taylor Swift, like the Taylor versions is like, oh, I want to support Taylor Swift, I'm buying from, but you realize you're buying from Universal still. You're not buying from her. It is what it is. It's the same with Target. Target has
all they see on the. All they see is the conflict that she had with the guy who owned those rights, right? So they're not looking at that. Oh, there's an actual big corporation behind it. Yeah.
They see TaylorSwift.com. So
yeah, totally. And again, reading deeper into it sometimes is like the thing that it's hard, because you have to get that message out. But some people, they only see the headlines, right? As we I have two things left, if that's okay. Do you have just
Yeah,
time for just two things?
I got
Um,
some time.
well, there's two things here. I just wanted to say one. I want to tell a story at the end that I wanted to see if you remember, and then two. There's this question that I ask everybody who's on the podcast, and it usually has to do with artwork and the life of it. But I kind of tweaked it a little bit to have for you. And so there's an old saying that artists live forever because the art doesn't die. If music keeps on being produced and it's in the world, that art will live on. Same as like, museums, they bring in the art, and as long as it's preserved, it's going to live forever, right? But we die. And in many ways, a person like you has helped to solidify the art and music that has been made for generations to come by the way that you've worked in music and the way that you've brought people together and brought communities to music and art. And have you thought about that at all and what you'd like your legacy to be after you're gone?
Dude, it's funny you mention this because this has been for the last like 5 years. I've kind of come to terms that like when I die, nobody like even today, like working at the salt shed or whatever, like these people don't know me. They're half my age. They don't know who we know or do. I'm fine with it. I kind of come to terms that like once I die, I just people forget. They move on. And I get that. It's fine. But I think what it is about touching and having experiences with the people who are in living moment right now with. Like even like meeting people who don't know they're in the Chicago music scene today, who don't know about the Fireside Bowl or the Prodigal Son or any of that stuff. It's kind of like, dude, you know what I mean? Like that was a big time. That was a thing for us in the music scene in Chicago. You know what I mean? It's the same thing with some people who have like Dreamers or those other ones, Thirsty Well or any of those other venues. That was their time. And I think honestly, it's about the people you associate and live with currently. I don't think I'm going to have a legacy. It's fine. I'm happy with my family. I'm happy with what I do. It's honestly just, if you don't be able to make it sound like it's really sad, but it's not. It's just about being living in the moment. You know what I mean? You
Yeah,
can't
that's a great
change.
answer.
You can't change things. I mean, we all live and learn. We all make mistakes. It's all about learning from our mistakes and picking up. You know what I mean? Like, and I don't remember who said it, but it was like one of those things where like you miss all the shots that you don't take, and I feel like that's
Wayne
sometimes like
Gretzky.
me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah,
Even when he
totally.
was like towards the end of his career, he was like playing every 3 games, and every 3 games or 2 games, he was still scoring 3 goals. And it's
Yeah.
honestly like I've kind of come to terms. Like I probably had like that midlife crisis thing. That's what I'm doing now, probably. You know what I mean? But it's like those things where like, uh, it's fine. It is what it is. And it's like if people don't know me now when I'm alive, that 20 years from now they probably won't remember me either. And it's
Well,
fine.
in my opinion, I think a lot of people spend a lot more time chasing a legacy than actually creating one. And like we talked about with Joe and his restaurant and stuff like that, he's now at like 10 or 11 restaurants, and he's not worried about you know this thing and what it's going to look like, but as he's working every day and he's present every day, going to work and doing what he loves, people are having experiences at that place. And in the future it'll be like us with our parents, right? Like we can talk about, remember that
Yeah.
time when we went to, I don't know, Shoney's was like a restaurant back in the day or whatever. Like I'll still remember that, and I'll talk about it with my kids, or these Chicago institutions that we all love, old style beer, whatever. And like it
Yeah.
becomes that if you just love it and you make this stuff and it becomes part of your folklore. Not to get Taylor Swift about it, but it becomes part of your folklore, and that's the cool thing. Like Loud Pizza Records, if you do it and you love it every day, at the end of the day, it's not really up to you what people say or think. But if you do it well and you do it with pride and joy, these memories of going in there and picking out your favorite records could potentially be something that they talk about for years and years and years to
Yeah.
come. Stuff what they talk about with their kids.
It's one of those things like, let's talk, you were talking about record breakers, Hoffman Estates record breakers.
There you
That's
go.
what I
Yeah.
remember. That's what I
Yeah.
remember. I don't know it as Reggie's record breakers. I know it's Hoffman Estates.
I agreed.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And it's just one of those things that you remember, and sometimes you forget people's face, and you remember their face, but you forget their name. It's one of those things where it is what it is. But like, if you can make positivity in somebody's life by the little small things they did, like that 12-year-old girl I was talking about earlier, like that changed my life by just asking for certain types of music that made me learn. Like, you're living in the moment now. Like, don't try to like worry about like tomorrow. Worry about today. You know what I mean? It's just one of those things. Like, I've had hardship. I have a lot of things, and it's funny because like like MSPX, tomorrow's another day. That's kind of how I was going to get that tattoo on my neck, and the guy was like, "I don't know about that. Let's do an hourglass instead." What I mean? It was just like, and that's how I felt. Like, I need to pick me up. What I mean? That's kind of how I did, and like, I'm very happy today. I get to spend it with my wife. We don't have no kids. We have a dog. And we just do the best we can, and you just live in the moment, and you cherish it, and you just love it. It's just one of those things where, like, that's what I want to remember. I don't care what anybody else thinks. It's just what I remember now. You know what I mean? And I try to do the best I can, and just learn from your mistakes and keep going, but keep trying new things. You know what I mean? The thing is, like, it's okay to try things and fail. And sometimes, like, going back to the band thing, like, it may not be the right time for you. You know what I mean? Tomorrow may be the right time for you. 10 years from now, it may be the right time for you. And it's okay, but just keep doing you. You know what I mean? Keep doing what you love. You know what I mean? Be creative. Make a change in the world, but people don't have to know your name. You know what I mean? That's what I think it comes down to, is do something good. You know what I mean? Like, how I see it, people want to change the world. Start with your block. Then move on to your community. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do little things
totally.
can do. If you take on too big of a goal at one time, you'll never succeed. And that's what I say about small businesses. Small businesses are so important to the local community. Like, they don't understand that that money is just recycled back in their community. By you buying something at Target, Amazon, is not actually helping things. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's the local barber shop, the local bar, the local grocery store, the local church, the local men's store, the clothing store, women's store, bookstore, toy store. All that stuff helps a community, and that's what it's all about. And that's one thing I always love about Chicago. When we opened our first store, we had like bottles of cans, Beguile, Dovetail. All these people came over and were like, "How can I help you?" I was like, "How can I help you too?" It was never about taking it. It was more about less like, let's help each other as a community, because if you succeed, I succeed, and we're in this together. You know what I mean? And I love that feeling. I mean, that's like one of the best feelings ever, because in the end, that's what, you may not remember your name, but they remember this,
Yeah. Well, a lot of reason that's why we're talking today. I mean, we've gone through so much time together, and we've done so many things. We've talked music. You talked about, I've gotten my pomade from you. There's so many things. I've been in your record store, and here we are over 20 years later. So to end our conversation, I'm going to go, I always like to tell a story about the person that I know. And there's a lot with you that I could tell. But this one sticks with me because of how naive I think I was back in the day. And before I do, I'm going to go over a couple emails that you sent me back in the day. That I saved for this. So I'm just going to read off a couple.
Oh my God.
One was from December 1st, 2006 at 2:39 a.m. What were you doing up at 2:39 a.m., Mikey? It said, Darren.
I was working, man.
Yep. Darren, do you have December 30th available for the scissors? I am working on doing the Gornies, Billy from the Vindictives' new band, Johnny Rev, the Repellents, and Second Path. End of communications. And then there's another one here from the 12th of 2006. And he said, hey, you're getting this email because I consider you a friend. I'll be DJing at the Note across from Double Door on Milwaukee, south of Six Corners on Friday, December 22nd, as the Methadones, Street Brats, Scissors, and Rule 22 will be battling me off in a night of drunken rage. Maybe some blood too for the holidays. Doors are at 9 p.m. I am told there is $2 PBR tall boys for you cheap motherfuckers that don't drink dark beer. I will have my large collection of my punk garage hardcore psycho pop vinyl and crappy cassettes out on hand that night. I don't plan on bringing everything out, so any weird ass requests, let me know in advance. Come join the Drunk Fest. This show is 21 and over. And that's great because I'm sure you have all that stuff in Loud Pizza. That's, this is what these communications are great. This is from 2007. You said, hey, Darren, it's your neighborhood bar. There's a neighborhood bar called Memories Bar. It's on Montrose and Cicero. Can you guys play it? Amazing. And then this is the last one I'll read off. So just so you guys know, he's constantly also hitting me up because like sometimes I wouldn't respond. And then he'd be like, hey, Darren, I'm just checking in. Did you hear about that Memories place? What do you think? Because I have to talk to the guys. I'd have to see if they could do it or whatever. And here's one from 2008 in July. You said, Dillinger 4, Scared of Shaka would be another good one. But I would like to see you guys get out of Chicago. This is another thing I know about Mikey. So as we've done well, he'd be like, you guys need to do more than just play in Chicago all the time. But I had a backup job in advertising, like we talked about, and it would be like, I was always so scared to get out of my comfort zone and quit my job and go out full time. And I think if we would have been a bigger band. And I think you were right about that. So I'm just letting you know, as I read this last one, I think this is like something you would always tell us. I'd like to see you guys get out of Chicago, even if it's networking with younger bands like the Flatliners and the Copyrights. Does anyone care about CDs anymore? I want vinyl format, but what do you think? Do you guys move any of those CDs on tour or at local shows? And this is the business side of you. You're like, hey, what the hell? What's happening? You should be talking to younger people. Hey, I think vinyl's making a comeback. Should we do it? What do you think? Are you selling any of it anyway? Like, these are great questions in 2008, and like you said, we started to have the biggest era of the Scissors in 2010, and we had started touring, I think, a little too late. We started touring around then, like more extensively, and it was just a little too late. But those are some emails that you had sent me. There's a ton more that I could go through, but I loved reading those and kind of preparing for our talk today. And then there's just one story I want to share with you. So as I was mentioning, back in the day, I think I was like, oh, I'm this punk rock kid and fuck like everybody that like is going to try to infiltrate this. And like there's a big wall up, when you're like this punk band and you've got a lot to say and you start getting people that are like following your band and that they like you. And then you came in and you're like, hey, I really think I can help manage you guys, So you started working with the Scissors and me. And it wasn't like I think at one point, like I gave you the CDs we had already made, right? Like maybe at that time, T. Harris was made. Or no, I think at that time, Viva was made. And I had done that. Yeah. And you were like, okay, give me all of those. And I'm going to try to move those or probably get distribution stuff going. And then we had started working on T. Harris together, which is the record previous to Viva, but was never made. I just burned a bunch of CDs and handed them out, which was a great record, by the way. Recorded all live at Atlas Studios with Matt live, and then I sang over it. But it's like pretty raw, pretty great. And you had a great idea. Let's actually do that for real. We worked together, we made the stuff, and I remember you even changing the art a little bit to T. Harris, which bothered the shit out of me. But I was like, didn't know at the time that you were really a good graphic designer. So we kind of had this really great relationship and we're doing things. And at some point, I was like, okay, we're not doing this with Mikey anymore. And we met up to, I was really afraid that you were going to like pull some legal shit on us or something and be like, yeah, dude, you can't have your CDs back or whatever, but you couldn't have been cooler about the whole thing. And I don't even know why we'd separated in what different ways. Maybe it was like internally the band was talking more about like, music and the business and stuff like that. It started to become like a business at that point. And me and you met at, I don't know if you remember this, me and you met at a Dunkin Donuts in the parking lot, and we both opened our trunks and you gave me whatever you had left of the Scissors stuff. And I gave you, a hug, and we like took off, and it was easy. It was like, okay, that's all it was. It was like, okay, go, good luck. I'm be rooting for you. And I was like, thanks, dude. Like, I thought you're going to be pissed off or punch me or something like that. So that's my story about Mikey and the end of the managing of the Scissors. And since then, we've gone on to be great friends, and we've gone on to you came to the last Scissor show we did there in September, which was fun at Cobra Lounge. So yeah, man, I'm grateful for our friendship and that music has brought us together. I'm grateful, dude. I'm so happy for you and Jerry and Loud Pizza. I think this is it. This is my favorite thing that you've done. I've been there in person to witness how awesome that experience is, and that you bring in bands and that you cultivate this thing where people can meet the bands. I know you had Kat Von D in there. You've had like really big names come through, part of this smaller record store that really you just want to connect people just like you did back in the day. So everybody, especially me, but everybody's grateful for the work you're doing, my man. And yeah, that's my story there about our friendship and all these years that have gone by.
So Darren, that is the most kind of stuff ever. This is like a throwback. This is what I'm talking about. Like, this is bringing tears to my eyes. Like, this is the emotional side of me. Like, this is like, when you talk about legacy, this is what matters to me. This is 100% what matters to me. Like, this is sad. You know what I mean? This is like happy and sad at the same time because I love this. You know what I mean? Like, I love you guys. I love the Scissors. I know you guys are doing your own thing. You guys are taking your own path. And it was like, I'm so proud of you guys. And I'm proud of what you guys did with it. You know what I mean? I'm always happy for you guys. I'm happy for you. You know what I mean? Like, you guys mean a lot to me. You know what I mean? You mean a lot to us. You mean Jerry. You mean you guys. I don't know. I love you, brother. You know, it's just how I think. Like, it's just one of those things. Like, I don't know. You make me all teary-eyed now. But it's like looking back on this stuff. But
yeah, well,
like,
a lot of time has passed and a lot of things have happened in between. And that's why I think we get emotional, because it's like, you can talk face to face with somebody that has been affected by the work that you've done and the kindness that you've thrown out there in the world. And that's a really great thing about this podcast that I love to do, is because, yeah, again, you and I have sat down 0 times over the years and talked like this. And this is really nice, and I had Mike Rotundo on, I guess it was last time. And he was saying, he's like, well, we could do this anytime. We could, you could call me up and like, without the podcast, we could just talk. And I was like, I know, of course, dude, but like, time goes by and we're busy and all these things get in the way. And here we are 20 years later talking about a catch-up session that we're recording, but like, we could have done this at any time. And I hope we do that more. But I also understand that, we've got our own lives going on, and that's just the way that the world works. So that's why I'm really grateful you made the time to talk to me today.
Dude, I love you, Darren. You know what I mean? Like, you're the best. You know what I mean? Like, you mean so much to me. Like, your band, like, I don't know, like I said, I just like, I've always seen something in you and your band and everything you touched. And like, when you got in the art, I was just like, this is amazing. Like, I never saw that coming out of nowhere. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's amazing. Like, you've inspired me. So like, and it's like one of those things where like, I just want to be a better person. And I think sometimes like, like you just talking about this is like, sometimes you just don't know where things are in life sometimes. And this, like, having this conversation and talk about these emails and like, this is just like, it feels good for once, because it feels like it's okay. You know what I mean? It's just, I don't know.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah. And listen, everybody out there who's listening to this conversation, this is everybody's story. If you love it, like, you can have this kind of amazing future or background and make something happen really special in the future. That's why I hope everybody goes and checks out Loud Pizza and understands that everything that we're talking about here is going into that business. Jerry and Mikey would love to see you. Their location is at the Salt Shed. And I'll, when I put up this episode, I'll put all the links to where you can check them out, buy a record online, help a local record store, and support music and support business, local indie businesses. That's the best thing we can say. Yeah, and hopefully this conversation has opened up a lot of people's eyes to what does go into making this all work and come together.
Yeah, 100%. And Darren, I don't know. I'm short on words, but I love you, brother. Like, this is like great. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I'm super happy for you. Like, when you moved to California, I was like, again, this is like a conversation. Like, we're sitting at a bar, but like, I was just like, let's move to California. Like, people move from California somewhere else. You know what I mean? Like, you're moving to California and you've met an amazing girl out there. And I'm just so like, you start art and everything else. I'm just like, man, I'm so happy for you.
Well,
I'm so
thank you,
happy for
man. Thank you, man. I think sometimes you have to realize when it's time for the next chapter or when it's time to move forward and start something new. Murder by Death just announced that they're quitting after 25 years. And, at first all of us fans are like, what the fuck? We love this band. I love knowing that I could go see Mr. T Experience every fucking week
you.
and or every month at the Fireside Bowl, but one day they stopped doing that, right? And I love seeing Murder by Death. They come to town in Chicago. I've seen them since 2006 when I found out about them. One of my favorite bands. I got to see them all the time, and now they're not going to play anymore. But then you have to come back and say why. That life on the road is hard. All of these things are hard, and sometimes it's just time to move on. What is that Rancid line? A secret to a good life is knowing when you're through. That's amazing. Like sometimes it's just time to move on. I was asked in a podcast about the Scissors, and it was like, do you expect to do something with the Scissors? Well, I'm never going to say never with that, but that to me is over. That's the last. We maybe went on too long with that, and I love what we've done, but it's time to go forward, make new music, make art, and move to California and try something out here. And let me tell you, it's not been easy, but nothing worthwhile is ever easy, right?
And I think sometimes people don't know that. They see your success, but they don't know the struggles you've been through or the changes you've been through as a person and the things, the paths you take. You know what I mean? Sometimes people just see the shiny thing at the end. You know what I mean? Like you said, it's not moving out there hasn't been easy. You had your injury and a bunch of other stuff too. And it was just like, man, you know what I mean? It's just like we had our dog at the beginning of this year. It's like, it's hard,
Yeah.
It's like, it's a financial setback and it's a life setback. And I don't know, like you said, like it's just build a community and stay in touch. And like sometimes conversation and pick up the phone and just talking to people. Sometimes is the therapy we all need. Like as a barber, I used to listen to everybody else. I used to be their therapist. You know what I mean? And sometimes we need
that's
our
true.
own therapist,
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I don't know. But dude, this is great. I didn't know like about dropping off those CDs and everything else. And just, I don't know. It's just like, I always loved the Scissors and I loved you as a person. Like, you know what I mean? Like I remember everybody else, like, but you were the person, and like, I remember we took Jerry to see you at B Kitchen and you came out with that new EP and she was like, oh my God, Darren is so sweet, so amazing. And he's such a good front man and everything else. And we're just like, holy cow. I was like, this is Darren, dude. This is Darren. This is why I love the Scissors back in the day and what he did. You know what I mean? Like, I think he was a good songwriter. I thought I saw something in him. I saw something in them, but you were the main contact person for that band for me. You know what I mean? You're the person that I knew that had that drive, that drive that drove you. You know what I mean? You were that person. You were the Scissors to me. You know what I mean? And I'm sure we all have band members. We all have, things, but you were the Scissors for me. You know what I mean? I remember Chris. I see your drummer sometimes here and there. You know what I mean? I can't remember his name.
Dave, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Dave. Yeah, Dave. You had Ken at one point.
Ken,
right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like, but you're the one that was special.
Well, I just talked about this with the guys when we did the TLB show here at Hotel Cafe, and everybody came out, and we did a podcast for my brother, and we were talking about that. And my question was kind of like, hey, there always is, like, we were talking with Dan from the Dog and everything. And I was like, well, there's been members that have come and gone, but it's always Dan, right? It's always Dan's band, right? The Dog and everything and it's not like an ego thing. It's just that like sometimes there is that person that knows how to drive it forward, that knows how to keep it going. So if you've seen that, like the Scissors that way about me, I was the guy just like you. That's why we make sense as friends. I was the guy who knew how to make the flyers, or I didn't know how to make them, but I learned. And I didn't know how to use the computer, but I learned because I wanted to promote the band. And I knew that these things needed, and I'm still doing that today. I have to buy the camera that's so goddamn expensive to go on the road because it's the new thing that, everyone's using. And I need to get the fucking gimbal to do blah, blah, blah. It's like, but that's like the fun because I want to make something. I want to make it and I need the tools. That's not to be said that you can't buy a shitty camera from 2003 and still make it the same way. It's just a little different. It's just a little different creative, but that's the fun. You just keep on going and you figure out ways to do it. And that's why we make sense together, because it's like, if I can't do it, I'll find a way. I will never just sit there and say, put my hands up and say, well, I'm going to go watch TV now. It's like, I won't fucking rest till I figure it out.
Yeah.
And that's why I think the scissors could go on that long, is that, or through all the challenges. And maybe this is another thing about business, is that you find a way, you just have to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say we could talk forever, but unless you have anything else you want to add to the conversation, I think this has been an amazing talk, Mikey, and wish you continued success. This won't be the last time we talk, but for everybody out there, I thank you, and I'm sure they thank you for such a great conversation.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. I appreciate you having me on here. I'm always nerve-wracking about the stuff, because it's like I never want to be the face. So even with Loud Pizza, we always have cartoon characters as the face, and like,
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, it can be hard to do these things. And as an artist, I also know that it's also hard for some people to come on and talk about life. For me, I'm an open book. I have my art online. All of the things that are inside come out, and then they're in the world. But some people that, this is not normal. It's not normal to go out and just like be put out into the world. So that's another reason why I thank you, today for sharing so much. Yeah.
I appreciate it, man.
You
love
got
you,
it.
buddy.
Love you too, man. We'll give our love to Jerry, and I'll talk to you soon, Mikey. This has been great. Thanks again.
Yeah. Thanks again, man.
All right. Talk to you later, buddy. Bye-bye.
See you later, man. Bye.